Ed Robinson of Kensington College, continuing our lessons on C#. We're going to take a look at WPF forms. I mean, what is a WPF form? There's one, there's two in fact. For example, we're going to click on a button and make some text appear in that text box. So it looks much the same as ordinary Windows forms, but there is quite a bit of difference, as I'll explain. So we're going to talk about WPF, the Windows Presentation Folder forms. We're going to be using a thing called XAML, Extended Application Markup Language. I think it looks like, and it is really, a form of XML. So that's the idea. Now this sort of XAML is going to specify the forms, which makes things all very convenient and transferable, as we'll now explain. So we'll start off as before by making a new project. But we're going to use this time a Visual C#. We're going to use the WPF app.net framework, and I'm going to call it, in my case, I'll call it my WPF, and I usually use a simple, as simple as possible, folder or directory in which to locate it so that it's easily located. So I can just click OK on that, and that should start making my form. So without much further ado, we can build this and run it to see the result. We should just get a form, just a pretty blank looking form. So I'll just stop that and take a look now at the code. Well, it comes in three parts really. The form itself, and we've had this generated XML down here. And also, though, there's a third element to this, and that is if I go over here and I click on main window XAML, because this was just main window XAML here, main window XAML.cs, and I take a look at that, and you'll see that's code. So there are three elements to this, and that's the code which is automatically produced as a result of the XAML. So you could consider that XAML producing, if you like, the code, the ultimate code. Now, the good thing about XAML is that it's purely text. That's what we should understand about XML and HTML. It's purely text. So you could, as I say, consider that to producing the code which is necessary to produce the form. Now, so there's three elements to it, as I say, is the form itself, the XAML, and the code, the class which is produced as a result of this XAML. Now you can see that this is very conveniently produced automatically. Just take a look at these here. We've got the title is main window, and so on. Well, we could change the title as well from here by double clicking on this and changing it. But take a look also at the height and width. Now you'll see that as I very carefully change the height and width, you'll notice down below that as I carefully drag that, you'll see that the height and the width change automatically. But of course I could go in here and just alter that as well, make that 200 for example, and this 400, and you'll notice that automatically that the form changes in dimensions automatically, which is quite amazing really. Now the advantage of all of this is that you see I've specified my form using pure text, and I could, for example, just email that to you, and you could put that in your C# and reproduce the same form. You'll also notice down here I've got a grid. Now if I just click on that, you can see that it highlights up here, it highlights the grid itself. There's a grid inside the window. So if I click on window, then you can see the outline of my window. It's nice, isn't it? So you can click on the grid and you can see the grid which is within the window, the main window, and this is useful for placing controls on the grid, as we will see later. It's like a container, if you like, which will contain. So if I just drag my grid, you can watch below, and you can see now I've got a margin on my grid, and as I told you before, I could change those and to 20, for example, and you could correspondingly see it just happens in real time. It's quite amazing. If I just change that 20, you watch the top as I change, it will just change that as we go. So we can do it from the design window or from the XAML to change the dimensions, etc., the properties of the form. There is another way of changing the properties of the window. If I make sure I've got the window highlighted, not the grid inside, and highlight the main window, and I can go to View and then Properties, Windows. You can see here I can press F4. It comes up with all the properties. They're not always easy to find, I find, but anyway, if we look at the layout here, and you can see it's 400, 200, so I can change that to 500, for example, and then press Enter, and we can take a look at that down there. That changes automatically as well, so it's all very coordinated. I mentioned previously that when we can actually just paste code into here and produce a form automatically. So it's necessary really to take a look at this sort of thing here and realize what it does. This here is the name of the project that we allocated, and that will necessarily produce the namespace of the same name. Now the namespace doesn't necessarily have to be the same as the name of the project, but in this case that will be produced automatically according to the default of the name of the project. So if we were to change that for some reason, then you would need to go through and change all of these appearances over here as well. But let me just focus on this one here, because this is the name of the class which is generated. So you can see that this XML, as I told you, can be considered to be a specification for the class which is produced, this class here, and it's called main window. So if I were to change that or paste some code in with a different name, then you'll see that that's going to cause a bit of a problem, because this hasn't changed as well. So we need to therefore go and do that manually. So I'll just type in here MW, which is coming up quite nicely actually. MW is the name of my window class. You'll see now that the constructor is messed up. I could take it says here show potential fixes, and that'll fix it up automatically for you, any other occurrences as well, but I will just do it the manual way. It's still probably showing a bit of a problem there, but you can see that's still working. If I just run the code, you can see my form will still appear. Well, you'll probably think that's a little bit of vandalism on the code, but it may be necessary to understand it, as I say, when we're cutting and pasting. I think I'll just put all of that back to what it was. So I'll put here a Control Z, that takes me back here, and I'll click in this window and do a Control Z and Control Z. That's quite nice, isn't it? It brings back all the originals. And incidentally, if we take a look at this file here, the app XAML, that's really the file that gets the form going in the first place, the application, and then goes, and you can see here it says it starts off the main window XAML. Well, main window XAML, if you look over here on the right hand side, it says main window XAML. So that's the file it's looking for to get things started. Well, perhaps if we just vandalize this a bit and call it some other name, then you would necessarily need to change it here manually as well. You never know, that might get changed to something else, so you need to change it there, and you'll see that it still should work as per normal. So that's the startup XAML file that it's looking for. So I'll just put that back to normal, do Control Z there, and pick that up, and Just paste that back in, and then things are back to normal. Well, as I say, it does look as if that's all a bit unnecessary, but if you are moving code conveniently from one place to here, copying and pasting, then you might need to know what's going on here. We'll now add some controls. I'll start off by adding a button. So I go to the toolbox and common WPF controls, and then I look at my button and then simply click and drag a button. Now you watch at the code below. Isn't that amazing? It's being produced automatically at the XML. So another thing about the XML, you can actually just put some move the text down a bit without any ill effects. You can see my grid here. If I just highlight that, you can see it being highlighted here as well. So, and it's being XAML, it's got an opening grid tag and a closing grid tag, as does XML. So we've got here the name of the button doesn't have a name. I've brought up the properties, and the way to do that is to click on that and press F4, and the properties window comes up. Now let's take a look at the event. So if I double click on that, it takes me into where it's the button click event. I'll just ignore that for the moment, and then I need to that's the click event. So I'll go back to my XAML, and then I'll change the name of the button. And then you can see that will I've made an error here because I've got my window highlighted. You be careful of that. So I'll just take that name out of there, and then I need to click on my button, and that will bring up the properties of the button. So if I paste in there, so it's worthwhile making that error because it's quite common. You're not looking at what you're highlighting. So you can see now that the button name has been changed to button push. We'll now place a label on the form. So I go to my label here and draw a label. And at the moment, well, perhaps I'll make a text box instead of a label. And you can see the amazing thing is that the text box appears, as you can see down here. I might just break that up a bit so you can see it. So this is the code which is once again automatically generated, and then as you change the dimensions, you can change the dimensions of the text box from in here. I'll just make that slightly bigger, say 30, and you can watch the button, the label just automatically change in size. So what I'd like to do now is to be able to click on the button and place some text in the text box. So I will simply, before I do that, I think I'll change the name of the text box as well. I can see another error that I've made. So I've chosen a text block instead of a text box. So it's interesting to notice that as I delete it, you watch the code will disappear as well. So no harm done. And I need to choose text box. Here we are. So third time lucky. So I will also change the name of this. So I'll change it to, for example, text box 1. And as I do that, you can see that appears down here as well. So now I'll go to the event of the button. So I'll double click on my button. It comes up with a button click event. So I'm going to put some text in the text box. So I'm going to type in here text box 1, and I'm on the right track, you see, because my name has come up here. Text box 1 full stop, and then the text property equals then I can go back and to my form and basically run that. And then I can click on my button and you can see the text will appear in the text box, much the same as for Windows Forms. And what I do find quite amazing actually is the ability to paste code into XAML to produce shapes. I'm just going to move my stuff out of the way for the moment. I might as well delete it, but I'll just put it up, tuck it away up there. Now, if you were to be able to go to this particular website, I don't know if you can see that there, it's c#corner.com/beginners. There's a lot of links on that, so I'll just go to that particular page, and here we are, landed on that particular page. And if you look down, you can see all of these wonderful controls that you can paste on there. Really is a miraculous website, this. And if I just click on this one here, the ellipse in WPF, just as an example, and take a look at that, and you can see there's the code for producing an ellipse. So I'll just copy that code from the website and then paste it. Now, where am I going to paste it? I'm going to paste it inside my grid. The grid, remember, is the container. You can see it highlighted in blue here. The container which will highlight. You can put some controls on the main window, but you can only put about one, I think. So it's a good idea to paste them into the grid so you'll get yourself organized. And I'll paste that code in there. Well, I'll just tidy that up a little bit. But you can see the ellipse has appeared straight away at the top. Quite amazing. So there you go. And obviously you can just move that around and resize, and you can see the corresponding code in the XAML getting changed as you do it. So there are a whole wealth of those. You could try some others there. There really are stacks of them explaining the canvas, and I really suggest you spend a bit of time going through these WPF controls here and experimenting with those. I mentioned before this correspondence between XAML and code. So I'm just going to delete the XAML, and deletes my ellipse, of course, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but this time through code. So if I go to my code window by double clicking on the button, and if I take a look at the website I just mentioned previously, we had the XAML which we cut and paste, but if you go down further, we'll see he's very kindly provided us with a bit of code here, a function called create ellipse, which makes an ellipse and makes a brush, which is necessary to do as well to color it, and then we can put that. So what I've done is just copied all of this code and placed it into my code in just near the command button. Now it's a sub here, so what I'll do is just copy this up here, control key, and drop it in, and then when I click my button in future, it ought to run this code. Now it's showing a few errors here. Let's take a look and see what's wrong. It says here solid brush, so it says show potential fixes. So if I click that, it says using Windows. So I could actually add Windows System Media to this, but what I'll do, I'll go and do what that suggests, include a using system. Has that done that? Yes, it has. Isn't that nice? It does that for us as well, and I preempted that by the Windows shapes, because I found that I put that using directive in as well, because I found that it was necessary as well. So well, I'll just show you what happens if we didn't have it, and you can see that it should complain here, which it's not at the moment. That's because, well, yes it is, it's complaining about the ellipse as being a shape, so I need to use that namespace as well, the shapes namespace. Now what's this going on here? Layout. Now I happen to know that that is the supposed to be the name of the grid, so you're adding these children, in particular this particular ellipse, which is called blue rectangle for some strange reason, but this layout root looks like a bit of a problem here. Let me just copy this, because if I go back to my main window, you'll see that my grid doesn't have a name, and that layout root is actually the name of the grid. So if I carefully click on the grid, and you can see that that's been confirmed, that's being highlighted by that being highlighted as well down the bottom. So what I need to do is to go to the properties of the grid. So I'll press F4, and here they are. At the moment you can see it's got no name, so I'll paste the layout root in there to the name. And now if I go back to my code, and it sees it's quite happy with that. Okay, so now I can simply go to my I can build all of this, and then I can run it. I've got an error, and that's because I've left a semicolon from here. So we'll try that again. We can run that, and now this time when the window form appears, and now I can simply click my button and you see my ellipse appears. So you can see the point of all of this, that I can do it from XAML, but I can also do it. And finally, as an exercise, you might like to try this. You can follow this making a scroll bar. That's the first thing to do in the previously mentioned web reference, which, as I mentioned, extremely good. And follow that through, and then the exercise is to, when you move the scroll bar across, then there should be a label, as you can see here, to show the position of the scroll bar. There are a few clues on there how to do it. You need to ascertain the name of the scroll bar and its value, and make a scroll event, and so on. So you can try that as an exercise to show you might have understood all the previous WPF.